Okay, perfect. So, hey guys, we are back for our series on hormones. And just a quick reminder, if this is your first time catching one of our videos, I'm Dr. Heather Rhodes, holistic pharmacist that specializes in women and hormones, fertility. And Leisha, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Leisha Drews. I'm a registered nurse and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And I'm also a holistic health coach. And I work with women and hormones, specifically fixing periods and energy, and really helping moms, especially like pre-mom and postpartum, like all of the aspects of motherhood. And Dr. Heather and I really both work with that same range of women. So we love being able to talk about all the hormone things and find someone to nerd out with.
Yes. And so if you are in that bracket, you're in a good spot because we both work with a lot of women, probably pretty similar. So today, one of the things that we decided to talk about has been, I at least find it like, well, I know you do too, because it's how we came up with our topic, but I feel like everybody is asking about intermittent fasting. And that has become this new hot topic. And I think the reason for that is because it's kind of being marketed as what it isn't. If you're seeing that. So, we went through the whole phase where it was like paleo is the way to go. And it's almost like the diet industry started realizing that, hey, people's hormones are really jacked up and hormones make a difference when it comes to weight loss. And I personally feel like the diet industry is kind of like taken a turn, and now they're marketing all of their diets as, oh, well, this is a good diet for your hormones. And I don't know if you're saying this, but it bothers me because I'm like, no, stay in your lane. Like, you're getting people these quick, fast results for weight loss. And then you're saying, hey, but this, positively influences your hormones too. And I think, at least from a lot of the research I found, is that it looks like that because studies are short. And that's because you're getting a short-term result. So you're looking at 8, 12, 16-week studies and how much weight loss happened. That's how the studies are being designed. And then they're saying, oh, well, we noticed it's influencing hormones as well. And so an influence in hormones is very different than helping and supporting your hormones, because hormones will always have a quick response, and then your body will get used to that and you will have a long response. Are you seeing the similar things?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I always want to come back to is that our bodies are working for us and they are very resilient, or we hope they are. Like, we're working towards resiliency.
Yeah.
And sometimes intermittent fasting yields some of those results short term. I don't think it does for everyone, but for some people it does yield some of those like results where you have better energy, maybe where you lose some weight. But there is a reason for that. And just because it like looks good on paper or because it feels good in the moment doesn't mean it actually is good for your body long term. And so I think that's a big piece of the misperception that we see, because it's like, oh, if maybe my gut inflammation goes down a little bit, or maybe I lose 5 pounds, well, it must be a good thing, right? Like, anything that causes weight loss is good for your body. And so I think that's where we start to run into a little bit of a disconnect in women understanding what's actually happening in their body under the surface versus just that, scraping the top, right? And I think what you said about like it being looking at long-term effects versus short-term effects, a lot of times we don't have those long-term studies. And so even the testimonials from people who do intermittent fasting, it's not necessarily that they feel great long-term. It's usually that, well, I felt good when I started, so I thought this was good for my body, and then I just got used to it. So yeah. So any piece of that you want to dive into?
Yeah, well, I want to back us up a little because I kind of jumped ahead a little, like a lot. And just kind of for anybody who's listening and has kind of heard of intermittent fasting or has maybe put it in a box, I want to expand on like what intermittent fasting actually is. So there's a lot of different ways that this is being utilized in all types of communities. But really, so intermittent fasting is essentially fasting for a period of time and then resuming normal eating patterns, quote unquote, normal eating patterns. And so this can look like, having, a lot of people call it an eating window. So you're only eating 7 hours a day, you're only eating 8 hours a day, and then you're fasting the other, 14, I don't know that math, 16 hours, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then there's also forms of intermittent fasting where people will do like alternate day fasting. So where they will eat like super reduced calories one day, and then the next day they'll have normal foods. And then I've also seen types of fasting that involve like you carb fast for a day, and then you bring carbs back. And then I've also seen fasting where people will do like 1 or 2 days a month during specific parts of their cycle. So I just wanted to kind of back us up and make sure that everybody kind of understood that when we're talking about intermittent fasting, we really are hitting on that timed eating window, regardless of if it's, every day or every other day or how you're doing it. If you're restricting your eating to a specific time, what are the implications of that, and like what's kind of going on there? And so you actually hit on something that I think in theory is what a lot of the research is kind of saying, hey, we think this is why this, particular strategy may or may not be effective. And it actually has to do with the circadian rhythm in alignment with the gut microbiome, because essentially some of the original research was like, hey, we know that different hormones are secreted overnight. We know that the circadian rhythm is affecting when hormones are released. And so we think that if we engage in these fasting practices, then you'll restore the gut, or you will increase the hormones being released at the appropriate amount in the appropriate time. And even the studies actually show this, that in theory, on paper, that sounds great, but clinical trials and studies are always putting something in a vacuum. And so when you take that vacuum, those results you saw in that really controlled environment, and extrapolate them, what does that look like? And so I think for a lot of our clients, they may be hearing these pieces about like, well, intermittent fasting fixes insulin resistance. Intermittent fasting is great for your adrenals, and it actually resets your adrenals, and it increases your melatonin and all of these things. But you have to remember that these are studies done on males and females, on different age ranges, on, the trials I was looking at, a meta-analysis that had over 16 studies, and only 4 of them used people that were termed overweight. Everybody else was in obese. And we know that obesity is a different category in the medical community than like, average weight, or than the woman that's just like, hey, I want to lose like my extra 20 pounds, right? So we're taking this data and we're applying it to ourselves, but that's not always what's happening. And then also, when you look at a data, how many stay-at-home, not even stay-at-home moms, but how many moms, stay-at-home moms, working moms, moms of little kids are going and signing up for intermittent fasting trials? A lot of times these are people that doctors are recruiting and then putting in the trials. And so I think that's another really key perspective to have whenever you're hearing about any diet or anything that's promising you these results, whether it be weight loss or to balance your hormones. Is this something that's been proven in a population that's similar to where I'm at right now in my current season?
Yeah, that is a point that I feel like is just incredibly important, because a lot of the studies that have been done on intermittent fasting have been done in men. And we know as hormone experts that men's and women's hormones are incredibly different. And even just on a very baseline scale, things that show up as signs of optimal fertility, like our libido, it's totally different. When men are stressed, their libido sometimes goes higher. When women are stressed, our libido goes in the toilet, because our capacity for reproduction is so different, and our commitment to reproduction is so different. When we get pregnant, we're going to have 9 months of a baby growing within us and then breastfeeding. But when a man gets someone pregnant, he's done. Like, that's it. So
and it actually goes back to what you were saying originally about like our body is being resilient, and it tries to be resilient on both like an individual level and a species level. And so it may be helpful. I just wanted to like briefly touch this. So it may like connect a dot for someone, but like when your husband, goes on a diet, and people say like, my husband can stop drinking sodas and lose like 20 pounds in 5 days, and I gain 1, right? And it really is because when there's a threat, or when like that kind of cortisol system is activated in men, it increases their testosterone levels, which actually drives their body to essentially want to preserve us as a species. So that's why their libido increases, because their body is saying like, hey, we've got to keep you safe. We've got to keep your genes safe. We've got to make sure that this species continues to live on. So you need to go get some things done. And it also prepares them to be able to fight and survive. And in men, that usually looks like dropping fat and building lean muscle. In women, same thing. It says your body says, hey, we need to make sure that you can keep our species alive. So we're actually going to increase fat around your reproductive organs. And we're actually going to, essentially like have you be a more viable environment for a baby, which usually involves more fat, more fat cell production at least. And these changes that I think, again, like, yeah. So anyways, long story short, that I think when men get stressed, we see these benefits that have been seen as like positive as a culture. When women get stressed, our body typically tries to preserve us and keep us safe. And a lot of times it even shuts down reproduction because on an individual level, our body says like, hey, you can't survive the stress that's happening in the world and then be able to like also create this human life. So yeah, right. Okay, keep going. But I wanted to connect that because I think a lot of us sit and think that it's us, that it's our fault, that our husbands are just like better at dieting than we are. And that's not the case. There's a physiological reason for that.
Yeah, I love that. That's so helpful to know that. And I was just going to say too, I just wanted to bring up the fact that like intermittent fasting is a plan that feels like it would work great for a mom, right? Because it's like, oh, I just don't have to eat as often. And if I can get by and I'm not really that hungry and it's good for me, then like that saves me time. So I understand why it can be so attractive as a mom.
Yeah.
And when you start to lose those hunger cues, it is a sign that your body is under stress. And so that isn't necessarily a good thing. Yeah. So I think kind of going into intermittent fasting a little bit deeper, just everything that you just mentioned about like when your body starts to be under stress, it's going to actually be holding on to everything it can to protect you and keep you safe, and it can shut down reproduction. And so I just want to bring up the research that I've seen that shows that intermittent fasting is actually so stressful to the body. And so what happens when your body is fasting? Like your body is made to fast overnight. That is, something that we need to do so that we can sleep and not have to eat 24/7. But when you're fasting, hopefully if your liver is healthy, it's going to be storing glycogen as an alternate fuel source for your body. And a healthy liver can store glycogen for like 8 to 10 hours pretty efficiently. If you notice that you're waking up in the middle of the night often, and sometimes you have like racing thoughts in the middle of the night, or you wake up and you can't go back to sleep right away, or you always wake up like between 1 and 3 to pee, something like that, those can be signs that you're having blood sugar issues and maybe your liver isn't storing glycogen well. And especially if that's like somewhere around 8 hours after you ate last, that can definitely be a sign that your liver needs some support with blood sugar balance. And there's a whole lot there, but I just wanted to kind of bring up that piece. But at some point when you're fasting for 16 hours, at some point, 8 to 10 hours later, your body has to start surviving on not just the backup stores that are ready and available in your liver, but it has to start breaking down tissues to survive. And so for those of us who are like, oh, I'd like to lose 5 pounds, it's like, oh, cool. It'll start breaking down fat. I'll lose those 5 pounds and we'll be good to go. Like that's all that's happening. But the truth is it's not just breaking down fat. You are going to be breaking down multiple tissues. And sometimes your fat tissue is not the easiest to break down. So sometimes often you're breaking down tissues like your liver and your thymus gland, which is really important for immunity. And your liver is incredibly important for everything with hormones. We'll definitely be diving into that in the future. But when you're breaking down those type of tissues, it not only takes stress hormones to do it. So you're raising your cortisol levels and you're raising your adrenaline levels to do that, but you're also breaking down tissue that's incredibly important for life. And so that in itself can be inflammatory and stressful. So realizing that it does take stress hormones to break down your tissues into glucose and into amino acids so that you can survive, that not only just sets off alarm bells in your body that you are starving and that is emergency, but it also long-term is going to be breaking down tissues that you actually need. And so you may actually lose those 5 to 7 pounds that you want to lose when you have a lot of adrenaline going, because adrenaline is a diuretic. And a diuretic means it makes you pee. And so you can lose that water weight pretty easily with intermittent fasting. But if you lose some water weight, and then you lose some mass on your liver or some of your other organs that are so important, you might lose those pounds, but does that mean you're healthier? I mean, I definitely would say that it doesn't. And then even just going back to what Dr. Heather was saying about stress hormones, just thinking about, if you know that intermittent fasting is going to be increasing stress hormones, it decreases the feeling of safety in your body, which in direct correlation can bring your fertility down. It doesn't for every single person in the same way, but just realizing that your body is trying to keep you safe. And exactly what Dr. Heather was saying, when we're in that space where your body is trying to protect you, it's not always going to prioritize reproduction. And in that same sphere, it's not going to prioritize estrogen balance or hormone balance. So,
yeah. And I think like, even just thinking, if we really dove into like, what are the implications on fertility? I feel like there's so like, that could be an episode in and of itself, because just like those tissues, so the most quick and fast available tissue that your body will begin breaking down is actually your cervical mucus. Let me rephrase that. Your mucosal membranes, which we know shows up in fertility as cervical mucus. And so your cervical mucus is huge in not only predicting when you should be having sex to get pregnant, but also moving the sperm where they need to be. And then on top of that, if you aren't trying to get pregnant, you need mucosal membranes for a lot of things. One of the most important being the gut. And so when you think about your gut being lined with this really nutrient dense, rich mucosa, which is just a layer of nutrients that keeps essentially a seal over your cells in your gut, so that way things don't start leaking through. When your body starts using that as an energy source, as a fuel source, it actually is setting you up to possibly be at higher risk of something like leaky gut, because you're now missing this extra barrier that should be keeping things in. And so I think I think it's huge. I have a lot of clients that talk about like, I don't have any cervical mucus, or, we talk a lot about utilizing BBTs to track not just fertility stuff, but even your metabolism, because your body will start conserving energy. And the best way, when we talk about energy, a lot of times it can be kind of like this fluid conversation of like, are you talking about me just like, feeling like I have enough energy to get through the day? Or are you talking about, calories in, calories out? And energy is actually all of those things. But your body gives you energy through a couple different ways, one of them being heat. And so when your metabolism goes into this place where it's conserving and it's having to break down tissues and it's saving and storing everything, it actually doesn't put out as much heat. And so you'll have traditionally lower BBTs, which are basal body temps. And that also, is kind of theorized with circadian rhythms and all of that. But something that proves this, which is so interesting, because when you look at these studies that are done, and they're, in my opinion, a lot of times somewhat skewed to be saying like, hey, this is why intermittent fasting is so great, because again, they're kind of designed in that way to be short term, what they're looking at. You can always tell with a clinical trial what it's designed to show. And in theory, we learn that shouldn't be the case, but my undergraduate degree is in clinical research, and like, always the case. Drug companies, big pharma companies, big diet companies, like people don't pay millions of dollars to run a trial and just think that, well, this could actually prove we're completely wrong. They really try to make sure that they are going to see what they are hoping to see out of those. And I'm not saying everything, but it's a lot of things.
But everything.
Yeah. So anyways, I was looking through these trials, and one thing that was so interesting to me that actually hits on exactly what we're talking about. It says that even a 1-day fast or a 75% calorie restriction during your fast. So a lot of times when you're eating in a fasted window, you end up eating less calories overall. In every single one of the studies, the main calorie consumption was between 1,200 to 1,500 calories, which if you even have remotely hung out on Instagram with Leisha or I, you know that we're like, okay, yeah, no, your body can't function on that. If you're eating 1,200 to 1,500 calories, your body is 100% damaged metabolism, most likely disruption, eating its own tissues, etc. But in these studies, that's the amount most people are having, and most people experienced at least a 25% restriction in calories. So in the exact same study, it was showing if we reduce calorie intake during your fasting window, these same people were still eating less calories up to 3 days later. So there was a calorie reduction of 30% during the subsequent 3 days. So what does that tell us right there? It tells us that your metabolism decreased. You're signaling to your brain that you needed more nutrients. And again, it goes back to that self-preservation of your body trying to keep you safe, because it's your body's working so hard to figure out, all right, she's in a dangerous place. We're not going to waste energy increasing her appetite and making her more hungry because she doesn't have a food resource available to her. Our bodies never think that we would do any of these things on purpose, which actually makes me feel like really sad because I'm like, it loves you so much. And so what it does is it tries to make life easier for you. And so it it decreases production of some of the things that drive our metabolism, like putting out body heat, increasing, essentially how quickly it's burning through nutrients. And if your body isn't burning through nutrients quickly, then it actually decreases the signaling you get to eat. And that's why, as a mom, I shouldn't even say as a mom, but just like as a human, if you miss breakfast and you just get in this habit of eating at 1 o'clock every day, you usually aren't hungry until 1 o'clock every day, because your body's not going to waste the time and the energy to make you hungry for the first 6 hours of your day. It eventually realizes, okay, this is a pattern. This is when food is available to her, and your body will always follow the patterns you give it. So yeah, I just found it so interesting that they even have evidence baked into their studies that show it slows down metabolism, but they use it almost like a good thing of like, hey,
Right.
if you do this, it's a lot easier for you to keep dieting. And in a sense, for 8, 12, 16 weeks, that's great. But as soon as you get SIBO, as soon as you get leaky gut, as soon as your thyroid plummets, as soon as your body hits this spot where it puts the parking brake down, the weight will pile on afterwards. So if you're doing it even from that weight perspective of I need help getting calories down, because we still kind of believe that weight science comes down to calories in, calories out, it will only, and I am so sure of this, and I don't have a study to tell me, but I'm telling you, it will only last for so long until the parking brake goes down. And that's where a lot of clients I find that go through my program are, where they've tried everything to lose weight, and they have tons of hormone imbalance on top of it, and they don't have energy, and like their day-to-day is really being impactful, all because they were trying to get to this weight loss goal, and essentially like it got them there, but then it wasn't sustainable, and it damaged their metabolism and their body so much in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I see women come to me really often as well. And a lot of times I think we're starting to build awareness of this, which I think is great. But a lot of times we don't even have awareness that our metabolisms are slowed. And even things like body temperature that you mentioned, that it's not optimal to have a lower body temperature, because
I used
I
to think it
believed
was
for a long
cool
time
to be like,
Yeah,
I'm
I
cold
believe
all the time. I'm such a small little tiny
I know,
human.
like, look at
Like,
me,
what?
I'm so cute and feminine.
Yeah.
Such a mess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even just like I used to, if I like had a fever, I was 99 because I was only 97 usually. And I just thought that's just me. So that's another talk that we can
Same
definitely
with blood
go
pressure.
into.
Blood pressure used to be the exact same. Like,
Yeah.
definitely, like you're saying, there's a lot of other factors when it comes to blood pressure, but like a low blood pressure can be really, I mean, like super low, like not like healthy range blood pressure, but when your blood pressure starts dropping, a great way you can know that without even testing blood pressure is when you have cold feet, cold hands, those extremities, because your body is missing the nutrients, the minerals, the things it needs to get blood flow going to all your parts. And if blood flow is not going to all your parts, then it's not going to all your parts. So it's really hard, again, going back to fertility, to get pregnant if you don't have blood flow to all your parts.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So true. So I think just in kind of like a recap of intermittent fasting, a lot of women are doing this specifically for weight loss and to balance hormones. So do you want to just really quick speak to, in a, like as a recap, why it's not balancing your hormones. Cause I don't think we've been so clear about that.
Yeah. And so I think again, the biggest piece when you hear like, hey, this is helping to balance hormones is because a lot of times you see changes in insulin response. And we know that insulin is a fat storage hormone. And we also know that estrogen interacts with insulin pretty closely. But if we really go this kind of like big picture, anytime your body experiences stress, it will decide so your body has a cortisol in function, and stress hormones are at the very top of the pyramid. So what that means is that your body will prioritize making stress hormones, keeping your heart beating and keeping you alive above everything else. So as soon as that center is activated, it actually decreases your health and production of your female hormones, because your body's always wanting you to be able to reproduce. And it knows how to keep your reproduction hormones in balance. However, because one of your reproduction hormones is progesterone, which is our great anti-anxiety calming hormone, because it has the power to decrease levels of stress hormones, anytime your body thinks stress hormones need to be high in order to keep you alive, it will actually decrease progesterone production. And as soon as progesterone takes a hit, it allows estrogen to become dominant. So most of our issues alongside of even insulin resistance, issues with PCOS, issues with PMS, issues with heavy cycles, even, we know that excess estrogen can influence energy levels. All of these things kind of start cascading once our body decreases that progesterone production. And then the whole other piece of this that we've kind of hit on is what happens to your metabolism. And anytime we talk about metabolism, it's really being controlled by your thyroid. And so everybody walks around with a thyroid that is struggling, just because what we're told is normal in terms of thyroid hormones is actually, for most people, under functioning. And so if you are somebody who related to like, hey, I've got some hormone problems, I've got these low body temps, I know my metabolism is shot, I've been a chronic dieter, chances are your thyroid is actually the one that's been taking the hit and trying to regulate how much energy your body needs. And so we see that when it gets overactive, when it gets underactive, then it can look fine on blood work, but in your actual cells, things aren't happening the way they need to. So I think that hit most of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And even when your progesterone is low, because your body is again working for you because it loves you. I just want to, like, both of us want to hit home with that a lot, because I have found that it is so much easier to support my body well and love my body well when I realize that it's working for me and I don't feel frustrated and like it's working against me. But because your body is working for you, when it's bringing your progesterone levels down, like Heather said, it's your estrogen can get out of balance and that can cause all these hormone symptoms, but also your progesterone is prothyroid as well. And progesterone is a hormone that you have to have enough of to stay pregnant. And also to get pregnant, you have to be ovulating. So that is, again, like that's another huge piece. If stress hormones are directly related to intermittent fasting, your body doesn't feel safe. And then your progesterone is going to go down when those stress hormones go up. There's just, even like on the very most basic level, there's a direct correlation between any type of long-term fasting and decreased fertility and decreased hormone balance. So that is why both of us, I think, felt so strongly that this is something that needs to be spoken to, and we both get asked about it a lot. So
and then my final recap piece that we kind of hit on too is just that a lot of times one of the first things people realize when they're intermittent fasting is that they don't sleep well. And when you're not sleeping well, and when you're intermittent fasting and your regulation of certain hormones are getting off, we see issues with gut imbalances. You get that increased risk for gut disruptions. And then we also see issues with your liver and your liver being able to detox effectively. Your body does all of its detoxing and nutrient processing and hormone building overnight while you're asleep. If you're not getting great sleep, that's a problem and it will build on itself. And then the other thing too is that when we are sleeping, our DNA is actually replicating and recharging. And when you have adequate levels of melatonin, it's a really strong antioxidant that protects your DNA. And so once again, if we get those rhythms off and your body's like trying to figure out like what is even happening here, because she's eating at 1, then she's trying to go to bed, 6-7 hours later, like because she has no energy, what is going on? And that actually has those longer term implications that sometimes we don't think about, of certain genes getting turned on and off and DNA not being protected. And these are some of the like silent things that I think we end up in a situation one day and we're like, oh my gosh, why did I not know what's happened? And it's actually been these small little micro changes that happen behind the scenes all the time. So
I was just going to say, I think that's why it's both of us focus on overall health so much more than just hormone health. And even if on the surface we focus on hormone health, like we are going to ask you about your gut, we're going to ask you about your sleep and your energy and all of these things, because it's not just a simple thing that your estrogen is off. And that's why we don't believe that birth control is going to fix your problems, because again, like if the estrogen isn't the problem, there's a problem underneath that's causing this. And so again, like intermittent fasting is just one little piece that can be a part of your stress puzzle. And the entire stress puzzle is what we both really work to uncover when we work with people one-on-one. So
yeah, I love it. Okay. And then we 100% want to take your questions. So if you're watching this and you have questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. You can find both of us on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Heather Rhodes on Instagram. And then Leisha's is
it is at abundant.life.wellness.
Okay. So at abundant.life.wellness. And I know both of us have courses and programs open now to help you with any of these things. And if you're somebody who, has been intermittent fasting and you're noticing like, hey, this sounds like me, and I know my body needs that support, I just want to encourage you that like, that's okay. I used to, I've done all the diets and their mom, and I think we just kind of shared our hormone journeys last week. About how we've done those things too. And it's still possible to balance your hormones afterwards. It really is just understanding that your body works in a really specific way. When you can have the tools to work with it, you're not constantly fighting yourself, and you really get that exactly like Misha's, Instagram handle is. You get that abundant life because you're functioning in a way your body's designed to. And once you get to that place, weight flexibility is a benefit of that. It's just that we usually go the wrong way. We think that the weight's going to fix the hormones, which is going to fix XYZ, or the weight's going to fix the fertility, which is going to get us pregnant. It's actually the exact opposite. So that's what both of us kind of stand for and are here to help you guys with. And we want to take your questions, and we're going to keep doing, these kind of Q&A series. So definitely reach out to us, or if you're watching this from our email list, hit reply and let us know kind of the thoughts you have. And we're here to help. Awesome. Bye, guys.
Awesome. Bye.